So we figured we'd do this in a sort of linear sense, and you could tell kind of an abridged version of the actual story of Blizzard and how things went horribly wrong with all the new information. Because a lot of this was early, some of this was a little bit later, but generally a lot of this list died for Project Titan, which we all know to have ultimately become Overwatch. So there's not really a story to the end of this. We know there's no surprise. In the title here is how Titan fell apart.
But the how shows us the problems. Blizzard had.
The how is very interesting because you'll see it. Was it they say about time being a flat circle? So this was. There's also I think a bit of Blizzard's rise being what was the precedent to their fall. Blizzard's rise was the problem. It wasn't necessarily that they were amazing and incredible, then something else happened.
So think of Napoleon, Caesar, Alexander the Great. Very successful. Until they're suddenly, like, pretty damn not successful.
That's how it works, right?
So a lot of, even these things that can seem like great historic successes, victories, that are rooted in, you look like a figure like Napoleon, you cannot deny, like, the energy, the strategic mastery, blah, blah, blah. But it just gets to the point where you're spreading that butter too thin, and then Waterloo happens. Yep. And so the thing is that within so many of those great success stories, the failures are also found.
Yeah, pride precipitates the fall, like that's what they say.
One little bit of context that will help people with this. So there's been a long question of like how much control does Activision Blizzard have over Blizzard Entertainment? From 2008 to 2013, technically lots of control, but they're pretty hands off.
Yeah, at this point, not so much.
Yeah, so the Celestial Steed, Blizzard. Diablo 3's Real Money Auction House, that was Blizzard. Killing D3. Like, the reason why they killed D3 after Reaper of Souls is because they did not have ongoing monetization elements, so they couldn't justify further development. Yeah. And that was from Morheim, because they were making these live games that would have patches and, servers to run, so they needed to have long-tail monetization.
Yeah.
That stuff was under Blizzard. What changes Control profoundly is the death of Titan.
Yep.
This is what makes Bobby move in.
Yeah, so this is an absolute and utter shit show. It doesn't begin that way, but it ends up that way. It's Rob Pardo, the vice president at the time, gathers the World of Warcraft killer team because no one else but Blizzard could kill World of Warcraft. But in not the way we know. The way we've said for years is the only people who can kill World of Warcraft is Blizzard by assassinating it from within, not from creating a successor. But they believed that they could create a successor. They were on top of the world at this point. They were like, it is the most Icarian story of all time. It is sheer just, they flew towards the sun on the wings. They went, these wings, they're really good. They're not made of wax. Shut up. We'll be fine.
Yeah, so they gather the best for the small team, and then as that team expands, they pluck away the best and the best. It's led by people who had been there since the 90s. Chris Metzen leading.
Hero himself.
Other people whose names we haven't really heard of. Shane DeBarry.
Yeah, DeBarry and Thavra, who are they're big Blizzard names, are just not super popular in the popular lexicon so much. But they were big behind the scenes, obviously. And it was Titan. They were like, okay, we're going to be different. We're not going to be the grim dystopia of Half-Life and Fallout. We're going to be bright and optimistic in the same way that they pulled everyone across the globe into World of Warcraft, however way they did it, even though their world's not maybe the brightest of all time. Wasn't until Dragonflight.
There's hope. There's hope in between all that Stranglethorn Veil briefing.
Yeah, they were smelling their own farts and considering it roses, basically. But that hasn't happened just yet. So they're exciting about peeling a 2. If I had sound effects, I would make that dun dun dun.
A broad audience. They say gamers, non-gamers, young, old, man, women, everything in between, just everyone.
Every single person on the planet will play this new video game. We're Blizzard. We can do no wrong. Anyway, obviously, if this was...
They must have had, Toy Story in their head.
Yeah.
As in... Because, there's an obvious Pixar thing, because you think about, the cinematic they sort of launched with. But, the way you can get those movies that a kid really likes, adults really like, it just is able to hit a broad audience crazy good.
Yeah, that's what they were going for. So they were going to make this alternate Earth in the 2070s. You'd have superheroes, and they would have normal lives, which leads to all this, great, casual gameplay, I'm going to call it. And then combat, battle, evil forces at night stuff. He was, a pro chef would put a dish into the oven before going off on a mission. When they returned, the dish was cooked and ready to serve.
Brilliant
and
example.
The funniest part of this is I look at that and I can immediately see the problem in my head because I've played video games. And I go, okay, so if I want to do some cooking gameplay, I have to go do some fucking combat in between to get real time to pass. That's boring as shit, but also it feels like harvesting.
This would be amazing. Imagine in The Sims, but when your sim goes to work, they're a Navy SEAL, and you just shoot people, and then you come home.
Warfare campaign in the middle.
Yeah.
That sounds great.
Perfect.
I definitely wouldn't want to have those two separate. Anyway, this was an all-star team, the best staff the party could find and pay for from everywhere else.
The best team to make an impossible to make game.
Exactly. So they made loads of stuff that they actually thought was great. Fishing, farming, photography, gardening, hacking. It was Titan Town. It was Animal Crossings in The Sims.
What if Gordon Ramsay is a bright, optimistic serial killer?
Wonderful.
That's the game. Yeah. You could live out that fantasy finally.
Yeah. Hard debate, but no one could figure out what actually the core loop was. They were just like, as
Schreier says, but nobody could envision what game developers call the core loop.
Yeah, there's an additional bit that, this is from Polygon's reporting, and I've cut it down from
Polygon got an excerpt of the book.
Yeah, they adapted an excerpt of the book. So I've adapted that adaptation to remove even more stuff so we can get the core bits faster. There was an additional line after this about basically what players should spend most of their time doing, and they hadn't figured that out, which is really funny. They've made loads of bits and can bring it all together, which I'm going to be real honestly with you. Looking at how certain games these days are doing really, really well, I don't think they needed a core loop at all, but that's a different story.
Surprisingly,
like a dragon.
Surprisingly, the combat side felt more coherent. And I guess that's because
it's a video game.
There's all of these people, they'll write an article being like, why is shoot the verb of so many games? Because you can immediately work out how to make that fun. That's the reason why.
Because shooting is fun, obviously. Anyone who's ever played a video game knows pointing, clicking on heads is great. Be they real heads or not.
Yeah. I mean...
realistic heads, not real heads, realistic heads.
So that's fun. Each player would be able to select from a handful of superhero classes like the Speedy Jumper, who could teleport short distances, or the Sharpshooting Rager, who wielded a powerful sniper rifle.
Wow.
Total rip-off from Paladins, I tell you.
Honestly, I was just like, Jumper who could teleport short distances. Oh, right, so the TF2 Scout. But super, okay. The Sharpshooting Ranger.
Nah.
All right, TF2 Sniper. Why is everything TF2?
No, it's fucking Battleborn, mate. Fucking Randy Pitchford's in shambles.
TF2 is the game.
But they had a problem.
Yeah.
These matches could be fun in bursts, but they struggled to figure out how to keep players engaged over a long period of time.
Why isn't our game fun forever? Game developers ask, wondering what. Obviously, this is in hindsight. Obviously, this is from a different perspective. But I think it's really funny to read this and go, "Why is our game not fun forever?" And you go, show me a game that is.
I think there's a little bit of a problem.
Yeah.
So many mobile games actually do this. You'll be doing a match 3, but then the things you unlock for the match 3, maybe it's an aquarium game, it's fish themed, so you make a nicer aquarium. Or you make a nicer dragon sanctuary, or whatever it is. The point is, you've got some sort of thing that's a testament to your achievement.
Yeah.
That's why I am actually pro player housing in World of Warcraft. Not because I think I'm going to invite all of my friends over for a tea party.
Yes, your friends that you have.
Yeah. Look, follower NPCs exist. It'll be fine. No, it's because you want to have the biggest dick house in the universe. If you have
I don't necessarily agree with that.
Not exactly.
I know what you mean. That is definitely a part of what people think, but I think
that's one player niche. So there's the FF14, RP, nightclubs, extreme drama, vicious online hatred.
Yeah.
You can have all that. Great. The other part of it, though, for loads of other people is just they've got a thing that they can build up. And whenever they thought about, say, The Sims in this, there's a little bit of that in it as well. Plenty mobile games do this, and I guess instead of grinding up a battle pass every 9 weeks, a more workable version of this is, you're building your base, or whatever it is, right?
No. I will tell you the answer, and I know this, and it's not anecdotal, and it's definitely not just me.
Fantastic.
Being trapped playing in Soulstone Survivors for hours over the past week. It's literally...
Oh, there you go.
It's literally gameplay loops. It's literally you do a section of gameplay, and then you make that section of gameplay feel meaningful in some capacity. And this isn't news to a developer, right? I'm not sitting here going, I have the secret of the Philosopher's Stones of video games that no one knows. It's how you actually design there is a meaning to the loop that you just did. Because in World of Warcraft, in M+, it's gear and M+ score, right? That's why you push for things. In Raid, it's raid progress and it's gear, right? World of Warcraft solved that problem with gear, more or less, and solved other versions of it with like achievement progress and things like that. Overwatch changed it with solved it rather with Overwatch 1 by leveling up after you play a game.
Yep.
And that was a little bit of a loot box. And that wasn't the most incredible way to do it. It wasn't super designed. But I find my weakness, generally speaking, when it comes to video games and where I get lost in them is whenever it's that, not just the go again, this will be really fun, but the go again, there's a little bit of progress. You've got a little bit of there is a carrot at the end of the stick.
Little bit of cookie clicker.
Yeah, it's that, but it's like the game is fun, but also the progression is a sense of like, is interesting or is fun or whatever else has a reason to do it.
The Warlords of Draenor garrisons were so close.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, the Warlords of Draenor garrisons, they had the problem of Blizzard took gameplay first in a really reductive way, where they thought every single building had to have a specific gameplay thingy, whatever.
Yeah, they didn't realize that
it's more holistic than that because it's a fantasy, and non-mechanical things can be gameplay as well. And it really seems like that is something that, yes, hampered garrisons in Worlds of Draenor, but also hampered how they mesh together the different loops of this game.
Yeah, exactly.
But the problem is none of this is being made in in isolation. And Riot are there. They've got Riot money, and they basically just were poaching staff, including, Jason reports,
I couldn't believe that when I read it.
At one point, nearly the entire animation team.
Incredible.
Now, we never saw their animations, but the only thing you need to know is this was the best animators inside Blizzard collected into one team to work on Titan, and that whole team was gone.
And then Riot stood outside the window and waved a thing of money, went, "Here, animators," and they all went, "Ooh, we'll have that, thank you very much."
Which Riot would continue to do for like another decade.
Yeah, and look at Riot being... Obviously, I don't think they have the cultural... because we're such a segregated culture now as far as games are concerned, I think there's an element of Riot having the cultural capital that they once did is no longer possible because they're not the mother or father of all the games anymore. In the same way that I think you look at Hoyo Games and they have an immense amount of cultural capital, but you can just exist outside that circle and never notice it. I think Riot have kind of maybe lost some of the everyone knows what Riot is outside of regaining some of it with Arcane. But at that time, because this is early League of Legends days, like they had it. Everyone was fucking playing that. Everyone knew it. Everyone knew they had the culture capital.
And looking at early League, yeah, they needed the artists.
They did, yeah. So that all that money that went into poaching these people and staffing up in this way worked because they turned their game around into something so beautiful, so pretty. Their skin work was absolutely top of the game and made them even more money. All the cultural stuff they did with Worlds, music and everything, that was all part of their talent acquisition.
But meanwhile, over at Blizzard, the internal technology, because they didn't use an off-the-shelf engine, right? This was not going to be UE3, which I guess is what it would have been at the time.
Oh, but then...
it would have looked just like Mass Effect.
Yeah, the problem is then it would have been... Where was the quote? It would have been a grim dystopian picture. True. That's all anyone could make in Unreal Engine for some reason.
So they had all this unique tech, right? All this custom-made stuff that was massively hampering their progress because sometimes, right, if you are going to make your first prototype, maybe a Swiss Army knife where you can kind of do everything and you can rapidly prototype stuff, that's maybe a bit more useful than having a custom built Formula 1 car.
Yeah.
So as much as every program in the world wants to make their own engine and have everything just be perfect. So they have an internal repository called Titan Art that grew so bloated with thousands of images that artists would sometimes draw characters or cities only to later learn that someone else had already done the same years earlier. The amount of art we did was enough for 5 games, said artist Vadim. Ran into an issue. Vadim. That's what Vadim said. Now, that's interesting to me, because one of the things that's really been in my head a lot is like project management and how it's done at different periods of time.
Or how it's very much not done here.
Yeah, because I look at that and I don't immediately think, I could make a Notion template for that. But I mean, how do you manage something like that, especially back then when people were not as focused on having like great project management software, and when games itself had just way less experience managing teams at scale?
Yeah, I think this is maybe one of the prototypical problems that happened, right? This is when, because I know Jason points out in this earlier on, he sets the scene because he does a better job of telling the story as a book, whereas we're just kind of talking about like Blizzard stuff and what matters to you specifically more, or what lessons we can learn from how Blizzard were working at the time. But he opened this bit by talking a lot about how game development changed substantially directly in this era.
Yeah.
It was at the end of, it was, after Wrathless King and the Cataclysm, it was around that era, around that time, the 2010s or so, the games changed massively, and they scaled up so exponentially almost that it went like in the move, it's in console gens from the PS2 to the PS3 is basically where most of it happened, or from the Xbox to 360 if you're wrong, but
so it's just as easy that they blew $80 million in this game, but to finish their vision could have been another 200 for all you know.
80 million, that's so cheap. Stares at Concord. But that's the thing, right? But yeah, this was the time of the period of time where actual game development was way bigger than anyone had any idea what to do with.
Yeah.
This was, we've spent the past, what was that, maybe 20 years driving these little nimble cars, and now project managers are getting behind the wheel of like 18-wheelers and going, it's just like a car, let's see what happens. And they found out that they do not control the same in any capacity, and resulted in absolute catastrophe.
7 years is massive for this period of time. 7 years is actually, if you want to do a big Naughty Dog game, it's oddly normal now, but back then,
but not 7 years of you have a full team burning money.
Yeah.
It's like 3 years of getting it set up. But like the fact
it doesn't seem that this ever had a full production swell. I think this was likely like a pre-production team, but a massive one as far as pre-production teams can go.
Yeah, which is probably where a lot of the issues run into. Because if you're making enough art for 5 games,
that seems like a problem.
Yeah, you've clearly something has gone wrong somewhere in the pipeline.
Yeah.
No one's going to the artists, why are you drawing Jumper and Ranger? We already have Jumper and Ranger. What are you doing? The fact that no one did that, it's obvious, right?
Yeah.
But clearly there's issues there that they could have improved on.
So later, or not later, but another artist speaking to Jason described it as Groundhog Day, and
I love that.
We learned that later several developers on the team would blame many of the struggles on Rob Pardo,
the leader
of Bonfire Games, because Rob left Blizzard, founded Bonfire, and a lot of time has passed.
And then released the game?
No, absolutely not.
No,
absolutely not.
Damn, unfortunate. Yeah, so I think some of the issue is some of it is in the same way that
Bonfire was founded in 2016.
Oh, good.
It's been 8 years.
Oh, longer than Titan's development. Wonderful. I hope he hadn't spent $80 million. Anyway, I think one of the things is...
It's got to be more.
I know. But one of the things set up here is that Rob Pardo was maybe in a situation very similar to Metzen.
Mm-hmm.
Where the Blizzard team, the Blizzard leads from the past, had all this responsibility placed on the shoulders with this rapidly ballooning company and these rapidly ballooning games, and they still wanted, I'm sure, and still had the responsibility of overseeing all of these games, because Pardo was working on everything at that time.
The problem is, often you'd sort of need an adult in the room, or somebody who has got domain-specific management experience. Somebody who is a similar thing, maybe they're 10, 15 years ahead in their career, who can mentor. But for games, that didn't really exist.
Yeah, you had game developers who were suddenly project leaders for hundreds of developers, and they're like, I guess we fly by the seat of our pants.
And also, maybe they get into games because they're sort of creative types.
Yeah, obviously, because all of Blizzard were, right?
Yeah.
All of Blizzard. There were some of them were a little bit more production and money oriented, like Alan Adam, if I remember correctly, was a little bit more of the one who was able to take the reins in that front very well, as opposed to, Metzen been I'm going to draw pictures of orcs and make up cool stories, which obviously worked out really well.
So for a characterization of that, it said designers would spend weeks getting excited about an idea, then set up a meeting with Pardo to review it, only for him to shoot it down without offering an explanation or alternative direction. On Titan, he appeared to be unwilling or unable to commit to a vision. It felt as if the team had made a dozen different games but had no way to unify them. Later, Pardo stood up in front of the company, tears in his eyes, as he gave a presentation about why Titan failed.
Yeah, so I think this
crushing pressure.
Yeah, that's exactly what I want to talk about specifically with on Titan. He appeared to be unwilling or unable to commit to a vision. There's no, and like, I'm not saying this to just say, oh, well, Rob Pardo was given an impossible mission. He couldn't have won. It was a Kobayashi Maru. There's no way out, whatever. But it was Titan. They were sent into the room to go, right, boy, you are all on the front lines. What's your objective? Kill World of Warcraft. And they're like, how do we envision doing that?
Yeah.
Do they even know why World of Warcraft is so big? And I think the answer is no.
And it's
I
even
think
harder.
The answer is we all look back and go, why is World of Warcraft so big? And we can't give an answer. We can give a lot of answers.
Yeah.
But no one's been able to kill World of Warcraft, which means no one understands how to do that, if it's even possible.
So I'd say, think about like SpaceX compared to Boeing. And obviously annoying given controversial founder. When you're doing a thing like, I mean, I don't say when you're doing as if I have experience. I do not. What the fuck? But I guess the point that I'm trying to make is you set this really hard engineering task. Let's do reusable rockets. And the reason you're going to do that, massive cost decrease, commercialized space. Why is Boeing and co not doing that? And why do they all sort of say, it's impossible, it's not going to happen? They're just kind of growing fat off government, cost plus contracts and stuff. But the thing is, if you want to do like a SpaceX or something that you could say is an engineering problem, to a degree, technology permitting, if there's a way, you can find that way. Look at the stuff they pulled off with like the U2, the SR-71, the skunkwork stuff from back in the day, even with the limited tools. Absurdly hard problem. But, physics, engineering, material science, you can go and solve it. I think the problem with something like Titan is you're almost doing the equivalent of setting some really big, lofty, hard to like kill World of Warcraft, like impossible target, but it's a creative discipline.
Yeah, it doesn't have an answer.
Yeah, So
it is not solve for X here, like.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. Their mission was to solve for X, though, was to defeat WoW.
Yeah, and the struggle there is, well, you need to commit to that, but how do you commit to something that'll kill World of Warcraft? How do you have faith in your own vision with however many developers underneath you to do that? And I think that's where it was literally the size of Blizzard and the pressure they put on themselves to beat Blizzard.
Yeah,
is ultimately what killed Titan more than anything else.
I think it robbed them.
They just did everything wrong because they couldn't commit to doing one thing really well, and that's why they had, what was it? It was listed. They had fishing, farming, photography, gardening, hacking.
Brilliant.
I could see fishing, farming, gardening. I could see farming, photography, gardening. I can kind of see like, okay, this is like Animal Crossing. Why the fuck's hacking in there?
Give me everything.
Yeah. Okay. Are you making, what if Animal Crossing, Watch Dogs, and Overwatch had a baby? What? Okay.
Well, that's going to be the full economy. Like,
we're simulating the world.
You could go and work for Rapid7, or you could just do it in Overwatch or Titan.
Get a job in Titan Town.
And so I guess the problem, or not the problem, but a big problem, is the lack of making a decision. And I think there's a really big fallacy or a problem, whatever, I don't want to call it, but a problem that I think for so many you could almost say cognitive rather than instinctual people. Because a lot of the time your instincts are probably that your subconscious knows what's right. There's been a bunch of computing that's happened that you're not really aware of. But for the very, thinking in your mind sort of person, you can always say, well, I could wait 3 or 4 days and I could do a bit more analysis, gather a bit more information. And then when I make the decision, it'll be more informed. And there you're like, we can do another prototype, we can do another this, we can do another that. It's not like there's a gun to our head to ship because we got World of Warcraft money. So I think they probably, like, indecision's naturally going to arrive in somewhere like this because there's nothing to force decision. And then if you have a leader who feels the pressure, and because they feel the pressure, they're afraid of making a mistake. I mean, if this ends with him having, tears in his eyes, he probably felt he wasn't able to make those big decisions.
Yeah.
I mean, like, biggest improvements in my life have been in telling in your, you're in your own head thinking about things. It's been telling him to fuck off and making a call.
Yeah. Just roll the dice.
Yeah, and like back
and not literally roll the dice, because there's a trick I really, really like, which is if you're it only works for 50-50s, and obviously it's a bit strange, but if you flip a coin, your feeling towards that coin will inform you what you actually want to do.
That's the best thing.
You flip a coin, and when you open it, if you liked the answer, go with that. If you didn't like the answer, because you'll have some feeling, then go with that.
Yeah, a lot of people shouldn't that, because they're like, well, that doesn't make sense. I'm not Harvey Dent. The point is...
The point is that
it forces a reaction that you can't control.
Yeah, it lets you see the signal that your subconscious and your body and everything else is giving you, which is basically your true feelings on something. I think that's obviously it's like, I wouldn't do it for any major decisions. It wouldn't be like, do I upend my life and move somewhere? Let's flip a coin to find out, But it would be like,
you could flip the coin to force an emotional response that could be useful.
And then think about that and not make a decision off that right away. But yeah.
And I think the problem here is, or another problem here, they should have absolutely gutted the size of that team.
Yeah, that's
because I think what then happens is you end up finding work for people to do, but you don't have a vision. In which case, why are you pissing away people's time?
Yeah, why
move them on to something else?
Yeah, that was like the like they were living in Groundhog Day. This is
like
one.
If I was on that team, I'd rather be fired.
Yeah,
I would rather be let go than have my time be wasted in circles.
Yeah. So I can't remember who it was, but one of the people talking to Jason about this said there was obviously sadness when they found out it was being rebooted, but a lot of them were like, oh thank fuck.
Yeah.
Oh thank fuck, because they're out of Groundhog Day. There might be some momentum now as opposed to. Yeah, let's do another prototype. Let's draw the same character again. Maybe it'll be right this time.
Yeah.
Who knows?